The ballroom still smells like candle wax and expensive flowers when the judge asks my mother where the money went. She does not answer. Lieutenant General Adrian Holt is standing 3 feet away in dress blue, one hand resting on the back of a wooden chair, looking at her with the kind of stillness that makes everyone else in the room afraid to move. Then he lifts my father's wing ring into the light and says, very quietly, "You spent his protected survivor funds on a wedding?" My sister Naomi always looked right in white. Even as a child, she had that kind of face. Soft in photographs, bright in rooms. The kind that made older women smile before she spoke and made men carry things for her without being asked. I was the other daughter. Useful. Reliable. The one who remembered extension cords, bobby pins, allergy medication, backup shoes, cash envelopes, and where the cake knife had been set down after the rehearsal dinner. Our mother, Evelyn Hart, never said any of that plainly. She did not need to. She had a way of turning toward Naomi first, even in small moments. At dinner. In shops. In grief. If there was one last slice, she asked if Naomi wanted it. If there was bad news, she told me to be strong and told Naomi to sit down to be. By the time Naomi got engaged, I had already learned the family job assigned to me. I handled things. Naomi floated through them. The wedding took 11 months to plan, and one day, to become a kind of fever dream I still remember in flashes. Gold charger plates. White roses so cold from the florists, then they sweated in their buckets. A string quartet tuning in the side room. My shoes pinching by noon. Mother moving through the venue with a clipboard and a face that looked almost young again, as if arranging beauty for Naomi had given her back some private part of herself. I paid for more than I meant to, not the big things at first. Just the quiet ones. Last-minute alterations. A deposit on the rehearsal dinner when a check bounced. The upgraded linens mother insisted Naomi deserved. "I'll settle with you after the honeymoon," she told me each time, not looking up from her phone. "You know how tight things are right now." I knew how tight my own things were too. I worked full-time at a county records office and lived in a small apartment with windows that rattled in winter. I had been careful for years. Careful after Dad died. Careful after college. Careful because no one had ever said I could relax and count on the family to catch me. My savings account was not glamorous. It was just steady. A little from work. A little from the survivor benefit account Dad had set up for me when I was young. A little from never assuming anyone else would cover what I could cover myself. The wedding reception. Naomi cried during the father-daughter dance she never got to have. Her husband, Ethan, danced with her instead, while an old country song filled the room with a kind of borrowed tenderness. Mother stood beside me near the bar, pressing a napkin into her hand. "Your father would have loved this," she said. It should have been a gentle sentence. It did not land that way. I turned to her. "Dad would have hated the ice sculpture." She laughed once, thin and sharp, as if I had missed the point on purpose. "Not everything has to be practical, Leah." That was the only warning I got. The next morning I woke with my ears still ringing from the band and checked my phone while the coffee maker hissed on the counter. There was a fraud alert from my bank. Then 3 overdraft notices. Then the account balance .0. For a few seconds, I thought I was reading it wrong. I blinked, refreshed the page, sat down hard on the edge of the bed because my knees had stopped feeling reliable. Transferred by authorized linked user. I drove to Mother's house without showering. My dress from the send-off brunch was wrinkled under my coat. My mouth still tasted like stale coffee and panic. She was in the kitchen unpacking gift bags, barefoot, in one of Naomi's wedding planner sweatshirts, with curled ribbon stuck to the floor near the island. "My account is empty," I said. She did not even flinch. She kept peeling tape off a box. "I know," she said. "Sit down." I stayed standing. She finally looked up. The venue demanded the balance before they would release the deposits, and then Naomi's travel card got flagged in Italy, and someone had to handle it. "You're young. You'll earn it back." For a moment, I could only hear the refrigerator motor and the soft crackle of tissue paper under her hands. That was my money. It was family money.
No.
It was mine. Her face changed then. Not guilty. Annoyed. "Leah, your sister gets married once. You have years to rebuild." She was already embarrassed about enough. I remember the exact shape of the light on the counter. Winter sun through the blinds. Thin and hard. I remember the smell of the peonies Naomi had left behind, sweet to the point of rot. You took it without asking. I moved it, she said. I was still linked on the account from when you were younger. That doesn't make it yours. She set the tape down. Don't be dramatic. Your father would have wanted us to help Naomi. That was the moment the room changed. Dad had been gone 11 years. Staff Sergeant Owen Hart, as plain as that sounded, had lived quietly and died quietly and been folded into family memory as a decent man who served, came home, worked logistics at a regional airfield, and left behind a few pictures, a flag, and a steel footlocker mother kept in the garage because it didn't fit the house. I looked at her and said, "Don't use him for this." She stared back with a look I had seen since childhood, the one that meant she believed firmness and righteousness were the same thing. Someone in this family has to think beyond themselves. She said I left before I said something I could not take back. An hour later, I was in Mother's garage with the metal footlocker between my knees. The air smelled like fertilizer, cold concrete, and the faint oil scent that always clung to Dad's things even after years. Inside were folded uniforms, old manuals, a shaving kit, and a wool blanket wrapped around a smaller cedar box I had never seen before. The box was locked. Taped beneath it was an envelope with my name in Dad's block handwriting. "Leah, if anyone ever treats this money like it came easy, take the ring to Colonel Miriam Voss. Paper remembers." Inside the envelope was a silver wing ring, heavy and worn smooth along one edge, and a brass key on a chain tag stamped with a bank name downtown. That was where it began that I called Colonel Miriam Voss from my car because I did not trust myself to wait. The number had been written on the back of Dad's note in pencil, as if he expected a person to call only if something had gone wrong. A woman answered on the third ring. Her voice was low and even, not warm, but not unkind. "This is Colonel Voss." "My name is Leah Hart," I said. "I found a note from my father."
"Owen Hart.
"He told me to call you if anyone treated some money like it came easy." Silence then. "Do you have the ring?" "Yes." Another pause. I could hear paper moving on her end. Or maybe fabric. Some small controlled sound. "Bring it to the Heritage Air Museum on Weller Avenue," she said. "Do not text me a picture. Do not show it to anyone else. And bring anything he left with it." I drove there in late afternoon traffic with the ring on the passenger seat and Dad's note tucked into my coat pocket, like something alive. The museum sat behind a veteran center I had passed 100 times without noticing. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of polished wood, old paper, and aluminum. Suspended aircraft hung overhead under dim industrial lights. Propeller shadows moved faintly across the floor. Colonel Miriam Voss met me near a display of transport planes from the 70s. She was retired, but nothing in her bearings suggested retreat. Her hair was silver and cut neatly at her jaw. Her handshake was brief and exact. "Show me," she said. I placed the ring in her palm. She turned it once under the light and let out a breath so small I almost missed it. "He kept it," she said. "You knew about it?" "I knew he earned it." I waited. Voss looked at me for a moment, measuring whether I was the right kind of person for the next sentence. "Your father was not what your family thinks he was," she said. I felt my spine straighten. "Then tell me what he was." "I'm going to tell you only what I can prove in order." She handed the ring back. "This is not a standard service ring. It was issued to operational aircrew attached to a compartmentalized unit. That means restricted. Not invisible. Just restricted. I was told Dad handled freight, records, loading manifests." Voss gave me a dry look. "Your father handled many things. Freight was only the part he could explain at dinner." That sentence stayed between us that I told her about the empty account. About Mother. About Naomi's wedding. About the linked user transfer that had drained everything while I was carrying bouquets and extra shoes. Voss listened without interruption. Then she asked, "Did he leave you a notebook?" "I found a locked cedar box." "Good." She nodded once. "That means he expected you to stay calm." "That's not the word I'd use. It's the one I would." Her face softened by only a fraction. "Leah, if Owen thought the money might become a problem, Then he would have left a paper trail. Find the box. Open it. Then call Michael Danner. She wrote a name and number on the back of a museum pamphlet. Who is he? Estate counsel. Trust law. Unpleasant when required. I looked down at the paper. What kind of money was this? Voss's eyes went to the ring in my hand. The kind that comes late, she said. And the kind some families mistake for luck. Before I left, she touched the glass case beside her where a black and white photograph showed a line of young airmen in flight gear standing under brutal sun. Owen never asked to be remembered, she said. That does not mean he was small. At Mother's garage that evening, I sat on the concrete with Dad's old tools spread around me. The cedar box was fitted into the footlocker, so tightly I first assumed the brass key must be for that. It was not. The lock on the box had already been released, but a thin panel beneath the bottom had not. I found the catch with the tip of a flat screwdriver. Inside the false bottom was a dark blue notebook, a bank deposit slip, 2 photographs, and a folded page sealed in clear plastic. The notebook was smaller than my hand and packed with neat, compressed entries written in the same block letters as Dad's note. Wind cross from ridge. Recount passengers. Fuel says no. Do it anyway. Most entries were like that. Dates without years. Tail numbers. Weather notes. First initials. Sometimes just one line. No second pass. My mouth went dry reading it. The first photograph showed Dad young and lean in a flight suit beside a man I did not know, both of them squinting into a white sky. On the back were the words, Owen and Reed. Keep the list straight. The second photo stopped me longer. It was a cargo plane on rough ground with people boarding in a hurry. Some were carrying small bags. One woman was holding a child wrapped in a blanket. Dad stood near the open rear ramp, half turned toward the camera. One hand lifted as if signaling someone out of frame. The plastic-sealed page was a typed document, mostly blacked out. Only a few lines remained visible. For actions beyond assigned authority, passenger extraction under hostile conditions, recommendation deferred pending classification review. I was still staring at it when my phone rang. Naomi. Her voice was bright in the way people get when they know they are calling into tension and want to outrun it. Mom says you're upset. I laughed once. Not because anything was funny. She stole from me. She borrowed from family, Naomi said. There's a difference. There really isn't. There was a pause. I could hear hotel air conditioning on her end and distant traffic through glass. Leah, I didn't know the account was all you had. It wasn't all I had. It was all I trusted. Naomi exhaled sharply. This is exactly what Mom meant. You always make everything so heavy. I looked at the photograph in my hand. At Dad's body turned toward a plane full of strangers. Heavy things are still heavy when you refuse to carry them, I said, and ended the call. The next morning I met Michael Danner in an office above a hardware store. The stairs smelled faintly of dust and old paint. His waiting room had 2 straight-back chairs, a dead fern, and framed certificates that suggested competence rather than success. Danner himself was all sharp angles and careful grammar. He looked at the ring first. Then the brass key. That simplifies matters, he said. I'd like my money back. You may do rather better than that. He opened a file and adjusted his glasses. Your father established a restricted survivor trust for you after a federal compensation review was reopened 3 years ago. The account your mother accessed was a linked disbursement account. Visible. Convenient. Deliberately limited. I stared at him. Deliberately. Owen Hart was not careless. Danner's mouth moved in what might have been the beginning of a smile. He instructed that ordinary household access continue to show on the surface until full release conditions were met. He anticipated impatience. So she emptied the wrong account. She emptied the reachable account. He folded his hands. The principal trust remains protected pending federal correction of service records and a probate review. The room seemed to tilt a little. Correction of service records? I repeated. Yes. For what? That answer belongs partly to the Air Force. He slid a business card toward me. Captain Elena Soto, Archival Review Division. She can tell you what has been opened and what remains sealed. I looked at the card, then back at him. How much money is in the trust? Enough to reveal character. I must have looked lost, because his tone softened. Miss Hart, this is not wedding money. This is delayed survivor compensation linked to service that was misclassified for years. Legally, your mother had no right to transfer those funds after you reached full control. Morally, she had even less. My throat tightened. Did Dad know this would happen? Danner tapped the notebook lightly, with one finger. Your father knew paper better than people gave him credit for. Before I left, he handed me a photocopy of one page from the trust documents. Dad's own notes ran in the margin, not a gift. A debt repaid late. Paper remembers. Captain Elena Soto worked in a records facility at Maxwell Air Force Base, where everything was too quiet except the lights. The building smelled of cold air, toner, and metal shelving. She wore her uniform with the plain steadiness of someone who spent her days among facts that had outlived arguments. I'm sorry about the circumstances, she said after checking my identification. They are not unusual. The theft. The delay, she said. That word settled in the room. Captain Soto placed a service file on the table between us. It was thin in the way official lies are thin. Enlistment, training, duty assignments, transfer orders, routine language, then black bars. Whole pages eaten by black bars. This is all that remained in standard channels, she said. Your father appears publicly as an air transport specialist and later a civilian logistics coordinator. He also appears, in restricted records, under mission rosters not fully released. I touched the edge of a page. Was he a pilot? Captain Soto looked up. I'm not authorized to answer that directly today. Then answer what you can. She studied me for a moment and seemed to decide I would not break if she stopped cushioning the truth. Your father was operational aircrew attached to a denied humanitarian extraction program, she said. That means missions the government did not publicly acknowledge at the time. Some records were compressed. Some honors were deferred. Some compensation was calculated as if those missions had never occurred. I set my hand flat on the table to keep it still. This is why the money exists. This is why the review exists, she corrected gently. The money follows the record. She opened another folder and removed a photograph. It was the same aircraft from Dad's cedar box, only from another angle. More faces. More urgency. These passengers were civilians, I said. Captain Soto nodded. Families, local staff, and 2 American contractors. Partial manifest remains sealed. Why? Because some people survived by disappearing properly. The sentence was so plain it almost hurt. She slid a second document toward me. Only a few lines were visible. Refused directive to reduce passenger load. Assumed command function after incapacitation. Returned aircraft intact. I looked at her. Assumed command? Captain Soto closed the file. Chief Master Sergeant Calvin Reed is alive, she said. Retired. If anyone can tell you what the papers still won't, it will be him. Was he the Reed in the photo? Yes. At the door, I asked the question that had been pressing against my ribs since Colonel Voss spoke in the museum. Captain Soto, was my father in trouble for what he did? She answered without hesitation. The kind of man who brings back more people than he was told to often is. Chief Master Sergeant Calvin Reed lived near a lake 2 hours north in a weathered house with a screened porch and a flag that had been mended twice at the edge. The day I drove out, rain had just passed through. The gravel driveway was dark and wet. Pine needles stuck to my shoes. Reed opened the door before I knocked twice. He was tall, older, broad in the shoulders even now, with a mechanic's hands and a face lined by weather and long memory. When I said my name, he stared at me for one quiet beat and then stepped aside. The house smelled of coffee, cedar, and the kind of old tobacco that survives long after the smoking stops. A framed photo of a cargo plane hung over the mantel. Another of 2 young men in flight gear sat beside it. Dad and Reed. Same picture as mine, only larger. Reed lowered himself into a chair across from me and looked at the wing ring in my palm. He told me you'd come one day, he said. He expected this? He expected paper to lose against greed at least once. I did not write that down. I just listened. Reed rubbed his thumb over one knuckle, a habit worn by years. You want the official version, he said, or the useful one? The useful one. He nodded. We were flying an extraction out of a mountain strip after an embassy collapse moved the timetable ahead. Weather was bad. Visibility worse. Cargo had already been cut twice. We had names on the list and names off the list, which is how governments make peace with themselves when they know they can't save everyone. The room had gone so quiet I could hear the refrigerator cycle in the kitchen. Our pilot took shrapnel on approach. Not dead. Not able. Reed's voice remained level. Your father was in the right seat. Not officially there, not on the paper they were willing to admit later, but there. Orders came down to take the priority names and go. No second run. Too hot. Too risky. Too visible. He stopped and looked at me to make sure I understood the difference between risk and permission. What did Dad do? I asked. Reed's eyes shifted to the rain-dark window. He looked at the people at the ramp. Children. An old woman with one shoe. A local radio operator who had kept the strip open for us. Then he said, there will be no second pass. The notebook line rang through me. He took command? I said. In everything that mattered. Reed leaned back. Rebalanced the load. Dumped equipment. Reworked fuel odds. Flew her out low and ugly through mountain weather with too many souls aboard, and one engine giving us a prayer instead of a promise. I sat very still. How many? 21 civilians. For crew. All alive when we touched down. And then, Reed laughed once, without humor. Then the paperwork got scared. He rose, went to a cabinet, and returned with a large yellow envelope. Its edges were brittle with age. Owen left this with me in '98, he said. Said if family ever treated his silence like proof he had done nothing, I was to hand it over. Inside was a letter and a copy of a commendation recommendation stamped deferred. The visible lines were enough. Extraordinary airmanship, voluntary assumption of command, civilian lives preserved. Your father hid things, she said. He never explained any of this. He left explanations, I said. Just not for you. That landed, not dramatically, not with raised voices. Just a pause that seemed to drain the room of every easy sentence. Mother looked at Dad's handwriting and then away from it, as if his block letters had more authority than her memory of him. Naomi picked up the photograph of the aircraft and frowned. Who are these people? I don't know all their names. Then how do you know this is connected? I slid Reed's letter across to her. She read in silence. Her face did not collapse. She was not built that way. But something in it loosened. Some childish certainty that love, money, and attention had always flowed in the right direction. Mother looked at the ring but did not touch it. After a long silence, she said, I thought the review money was back pay. Household money. Something he was owed for all of us. I met her eyes. It was owed because he carried what you never even asked about. She lowered her gaze. That was the closest thing to acknowledgement I had heard from her in years. The hearing was held in a municipal chamber because the probate room was too small for the military delegation, the attorneys, and the number of veterans who had heard enough through private channels to come sit in the back. The wood benches smelled faintly of polish and old paper. Outside, rain moved against the windows in thin silver lines. Inside, no one spoke above a murmur. Mother sat beside Naomi in a beige suit that made her look smaller than I had ever seen her. Naomi held her purse in both hands, resting it in her lap like a shield. Across the aisle sat Colonel Miriam Voss, Captain Elena Soto, Dr. Lydia Chen, Michael Danner, Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Shaw, and Chief Master Sergeant Calvin Reed. Then Lieutenant General Adrian Holt entered. The room rose. He was not theatrical. That made him more commanding. Tall, broad-shouldered, silver at the temples, dress blue pressed so sharply it seemed cut from intention itself. He took his seat, waited for the judge, and when called, stood at the witness table with my father's wing ring in one hand and a sealed folder in the other. Judge Marin Ellis nodded to him. General Holt, you may proceed. He did. My name is Lieutenant General Adrian Holt, he said, Deputy Commander for Legacy Air Operations Review. I am here to enter the corrected record of Staff Sergeant Owen Michael Hart. The chamber went still. Holt opened the folder. For years, Mr. Hart appeared in public records as a transport specialist attached to logistics support. That description was incomplete. He looked down once, then up again. On the night of the Lantern Ridge extraction, after the assigned aircraft commander was incapacitated, Staff Sergeant Owen Hart assumed effective command of the aircraft, refused an order that would have left civilian evacuees behind, reorganized the load, recalculated departure weight under hostile conditions, and flew 21 civilians and 4 crew members out of a mountain strip that command had already judged unrecoverable. No one moved. The judge did not interrupt. She knew better. Holt continued. Because the mission itself remained restricted, the record minimized his role, deferred his commendation, and limited compensation attached to the service. That error is corrected today. He lifted the ring slightly. Effective immediately, the Department of the Air Force recognizes Owen Michael Hart as acting aircraft commander during the Lantern Ridge extraction, restores associated operational credit, awards the Distinguished Flying Cross posthumously, and confirms the survivor compensation attached to that corrected service. I heard Naomi inhale beside Mother.
Sharp.
Unhidden. Holt turned one page. These funds were not discretionary family money. They were protected survivor benefits and delayed restitution arising from a misrecorded act of extraordinary service. Then he looked directly at my mother. His voice did not rise. You used a dead airman's protected restitution to pay wedding invoices. Mother's face lost color. Judge Ellis leaned forward. Mrs. Hart, do you contest that statement? Mother opened her mouth.
Closed it.
Her hand trembled once against the table. No, Your Honor. Judge Ellis nodded as if she had expected nothing else. Then let the record reflect that the transfer was unauthorized, the trust remains intact, and full restitution is ordered. General Holt stepped back from the table. Then, without any sign of performance, he turned toward the framed photograph of Dad that Dr. Chun had placed beside the evidence folders. He came to attention. His salute was exact.
Clean.
Final. This country was late, he said. Owen Hart was not. It was the only grand thing in the room, and because it was true, it did not feel grand at all. After the ruling, the chamber emptied slowly, like a church after a funeral when no one quite knows whether to speak. Veterans came first. An older woman in a navy coat stopped in front of me and said, "My brother was one of the contractors on that plane." Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. "Your father gave my family 50 years, we were not promised." Then she squeezed my hand and walked away. I stood near the side wall with the metal case under my arm and Dad's ring in my coat pocket while lawyers exchanged copies and signatures. Colonel Voss came by, nodded once and said, he'd hate the attention. He'd approve the record. That sounded right. Naomi approached before Mother did. She looked tired now. Not glamorous. Just young in a way I had not noticed for years because Mother had spent so much time polishing her into something brighter than ordinary life. Her voice had dropped. "I didn't know," she said. "I know." She glanced at the metal case. "Mom told me it was temporary, that it was just money moving around until Dad's review finished." I looked at her for a moment. "And you were willing to believe that because it helped?" She swallowed, nodded once. There was no speech after that.
No tears.
Just a person standing inside a truth she had not earned the easy way. Mother found me in the corridor outside the chamber, where the old tile floor carried every footstep. The rain had stopped. Light from the high windows lay in pale rectangles across the wall. For a few seconds she could not seem to begin. Then she said, "I have already instructed my attorney to repay everything I can immediately. Everything I can, not I am sorry, not I was wrong." Just the first honest sentence available to her. "Danner will handle it," I said. She nodded. Her eyes were on the ring. "I didn't know what he'd done," she said quietly. "No," I said. "You only knew what he never forced you to see." That hurt her. I meant it to. But she did not defend herself. That was new. She took a breath and said, "When he came home, he never talked. He folded into work, into chores, into bills." I thought she stopped there. What? I thought quiet meant he had made peace with being ordinary. I felt something cold and clean move through me then. Not victory. Not forgiveness. Just clarity. "Quiet does not mean small," I said. Mother closed her eyes briefly, as if the phrase had been waiting for her somewhere she had refused to look. A week later, she came to my apartment carrying a banker's envelope and a yellow legal pad folded in half. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, taking in the narrow hall, the books stacked on the radiator cover, the chipped mug on my counter. I do not think she had ever really seen how I lived. "This is the first repayment," she said, handing me the envelope. "The rest will follow, through the trust office." I set it down unopened. Then she held out the legal pad page. IT was a list in her handwriting. Storage unit cancellation. Credit card closed.
Wedding decorator lawsuit withdrawn.
Jewelry sold back. Refunds requested. A smaller life, written down line by line. "I'm fixing what I can," she said. That was all. I stepped aside and let her in for coffee. We did not talk about healing. We talked about the weather. About Naomi landing safely in Rome before all of this fell apart. About whether the county would clear storm branches from the old cemetery road before Memorial Day. Small things. Human things. When she left, she paused at the door and said, without turning back, "Your father used to sharpen the kitchen knives when he couldn't sleep." It was such an ordinary memory that it nearly broke me. "I know," I said. She nodded and went down the stairs. Naomi's gesture came later. Smaller, but real. On the day the military marker was placed at Dad's grave, she arrived early carrying white flowers she had paid for herself. She did not wear anything dramatic. No dark glasses.
No polished grief.
She set the flowers down beside the new bronze plate and stepped back. Then she asked, in a voice I barely recognized, "Can I see the notebook sometime?" "Yes," I said, "not today." But yes, that was the first honest bridge between us. IT did not erase what happened. The empty account. The wedding laughter paid, for with money Mother had no right to touch. The months of being treated as the daughter who could absorb damage because I was strong and practical and young enough to recover. But it was something, and something, when it is true, matters. People kept trying to tell me what the story was about after that. Some said it was about justice. Some said greed. Some said family favoritism, or military secrecy, or a daughter finally standing up for herself. None of those were wrong. None were complete. For me, it became a story about silence, not helpless silence. Not fearful silence. The other kind. The kind a person chooses because their work is larger than their need to be seen doing it. My father never asked to be remembered. The more I sat with that, the less sad it sounded, and the more disciplined it became. He did not chase witness. He chased accuracy. He wanted the people on that aircraft counted. He wanted the debt paid properly. He wanted the paper straight. Paper remembers. Families do not always. That was the harder lesson. Do we think we know the quiet people in our homes because they do not interrupt us? We think modesty is proof of smallness. We take steadiness as background. We call a person ordinary because they do not market themselves to us in language we recognize as importance. My mother did that. Naomi did too. If I am honest, I did it in smaller ways myself. I loved my father. I missed him. I defended him when people spoke casually. But even I had accepted a version of him shaped by missing information and the convenience of other people's assumptions. Then the ring came out of the cedar box. Then the notebook opened. Then the paper, patient as stone, began giving back the man we had reduced. Strength, I think now, is not loudness. It is not the ability to dominate a room, or spend carelessly, or treat other people's endurance as an available resource. Strength is the refusal to abandon what is yours to protect, even when no one is waiting to applaud you for it. Sometimes it looks like flying a damaged plane out of a mountain strip with more souls aboard than you were ordered to save. Sometimes it looks like leaving a careful trail for the one daughter you know will keep walking when others get tired. Sometimes it looks like a woman at a kitchen table deciding that being called difficult is a small price for telling the truth. Legacy changed for me too, that I used to think legacy meant what the world said after you were gone. A medal. A headstone. A folded flag. Now I think legacy is also what your life exposes in the people around you. My father's hidden record exposed greed in my mother, softness in Naomi, patience in Colonel Voss, stubborn honor in Dr. Chen, loyalty in Chief Master Sergeant Reed, and, in me, a capacity to keep records straight when feelings would have been easier. He left behind facts, yes. But he also left a test. We all took it. Not all of us passed on the first try. Quiet does not mean small. Did I say that now the way some people say grace before meals? Not for performance. For correction. It reminds me that volume and value have never been the same thing. It reminds me that the person everyone overlooks may be carrying the heaviest proof, the deepest hurt, or the cleanest conscience in the room. It reminds me that some people spend their whole lives protecting others from the weight of what they know, and then die being mistaken for simple because they never made a show of the cost. As oh, if there is anything worth caring for my story, it is not outrage. It is attention. Pay closer attention to the quiet one in the room, the one who does not interrupt, the one who remembers dates, keeps copies, notices inconsistencies, and does not waste words trying to make themselves sound important. Quiet people are often carrying the very things louder people spend years pretending do not exist. Look again before you dismiss them.